We only have an hour, so we really are going to dive right in. I know people will be coming, will be joining us over the next couple of minutes. But hello, welcome to Community Foundation Sonoma County, our workshop for the COVID-19 Community Impact Competitive Grants Program. It's really fun to see everybody. I wish we had time to just say a hello, but what I'm going to ask you all to do as a way to enter your voice into the room is to take a moment, put your name into the chat, and could you just include in there one word that describes your state of being today? So just take a moment, name, and one word that describes your state of being. This is fun. Are you all watching it too? It is a new day. Well, thank you. That was really, it's really, yeah, I mean, I feel like I want to give hugs to the people who are tired. I want to give coffee to them. I want to give a little neck rub to some people who are extra caffeinated. But just let me say, I'm grateful to all of you. We're all so grateful for the work that you do, and we know everybody has been working incredibly hard every single day. I mean, the days are one big blur now, and yeah, Veronica, unstoppable. Let's all lead with that. Thank you so much. So we're going to dive right in. Okay, go ahead and share this, the PowerPoint, Ariana. So we are really excited to be launching this grants program. It's a little bit different for us, and we're going to dive into the agenda. I will tell you a little bit about what you can expect over the next hour. So that was a little bit of our introductions. I'm going to tell you a little bit more about the grants program, provide an overview, really dive into our funding priorities, the evaluation criteria that we'll be using to make our decisions, and then we'll do a Q&A about halfway through just about the grant program itself. And then we'll be looking at the application process. Ariana will walk you through, you know, all that you'll need for the technical support you need, how you'll get on the application and the timeline and everything. And then we'll do another Q&A on that more technical side. For the Q&As, I would say we're going to do hand raising using your reactions button. Then we'll be able to see you in the participant list who's raised their hand. But throughout, if you have questions, go ahead and put them in the chat. We'll be looking at the questions, and so we can start to see what are the main themes that are starting to arise. Like most of our grants workshops, you know, the impulse or the desire is to say, would my program be a good fit for this grants program? And since there are 53 people on this, we won't be able to answer that question. So the hope is that what we're giving to you today is enough information for you to make that decision yourself. We would never, and we don't, regardless of how much information you give us, we're not going to tell you whether or not you should or shouldn't apply. We hope that we've created the funding priorities and our evaluation criteria clear enough so that you can say, this one isn't really actually a good fit for my program, or yes, it's a good fit. I'm not sure if I'm going to be competitive, but it's worth applying, or we've got this one in the bag and we're going to go for it. So, you know, those are decisions that you're going to make. All right, next slide. So the COVID Community Impact Competitive Grants Program is is a little new to us. We haven't done competitive grant making with the Resilience Fund, and we're excited to launch it. And the reason we came up with this program is there's many reasons, but three sort of driving things that we know. One is there is never going to be enough philanthropic resource to meet the need in the community, and so we have to really target our funding so that it can have the greatest possible impact on the needs that we see that are most pressing. In this case, with COVID-19, we know that there is a disproportionate impact on the Latinx community. We know that seniors are impacted. We know that our homeless population is needing to stay safe. And we know that there are particular impacts that are coming to bear on these communities. And so those are some of the things we know. We also know that in this time of COVID, our world has also awakened to the racial injustices that are embedded, the systemic racial injustices that are embedded in our society. And that awakening is profound, and hopefully it will continue. It just so happened that was happening at the same time that the Community Foundation was saying, we've been collecting data about diversity, equity, and inclusion, and we were beginning to launch our own internal planning process. And so we knew that we were shifting from just having values around equity to embedding it in everything that we do. And so finally, we also recognize that the grant making that we've done to date has been based on what best practice is right now in philanthropy is trust-based grant making. Trusting so that we can get funds out quickly in an emergency, trusting those who we know, and making grants that way, not in a competitive way, but in an invitation. What that does is also limits those who we are able to fund, and we wanted to address that. We wanted our grant making to reflect our values around equity. And so this grants program is meant to address the needs of nonprofits outside of the circle of grantees that we've had over the last years. So I'll talk more about that in a second. The grant program overview, the purpose of this grant, so this is sort of the fundamental gate that you would pass as you're making your decision, is to support organizations that provide direct services to individuals and families affected by COVID. So we know there are individuals and families out there who have been affected by this pandemic, and some of the ways that they have been affected is through their impacts on their mental health. Financial assistance is enormous. The need for financial assistance is really big. And then food insecurity. Lots of people are needing food, and the increase in the need for food is great. So these are examples of some of the direct services that people provide, that nonprofits are providing to families or individuals affected by COVID. These are just examples. There may be other ways in which you are providing services, but these would be the ones, these examples here are the ones that we will likely be prioritizing. The grant range is $15,000 to $25,000. You know, typically when there's a range, we're going to see the majority of applications come in at $25,000. But if you only needed 15, that means somebody else gets to have a grant of 10. So, and there is the chance that we would do some partial funding here to be sure that everyone that we see that we would like to fund is able to be funded. Okay, next slide, please. So here are our funding priorities. We are starting with race, ethnicity, demographics as a priority. So we know it's been well documented, Latinx and BIPOC communities are majority impacted by COVID. The identity-based communities, low-income seniors and people experiencing homelessness. And finally, we know geographic regions have been most impacted. Santa Rosa, Petaluma, and Pengrove have the highest, did when we made this, but Santa Rosa still is the top. So this is another path by which we will say, okay, is this program, are these direct services going to any of these funding priorities? The question I'm sure is, well, what if we're serving Latinx in Sonoma Valley? Absolutely, we would encourage you to apply if you know all other things are you're providing direct services, it's financial assistance, but it's in Sonoma Valley. Well, if there's other organizations that are providing financial assistance to the Latinx community in Santa Rosa, they might be more competitive, but this is going to be a big grants program. And so we are going to use these to help make our decisions. So what I'm trying to say is, this is our first pass. This is how we will make decisions, but this is not the only way in which decisions are made. And if any of my colleagues who I made the mistake of not introducing, so I'm going to pause at the Q&A. When we get to Q&A, I'm going to have them introduce themselves. I hope that any of my colleagues would jump in and fill in if I miss anything. Okay, next slide. So this is how we're going to evaluate. We are putting equity into action, as I was saying. So we want to make these grants first accessible to grassroots and new efforts. So we have created a tiered process. Tier 1 is nonprofits that have not received a grant from us in 2020. And if you go on our website, you will see the list. It's a big list. We've made a lot of grants in 2020 so far, but there are a lot of you who are not on that list, and you would be applying through Tier 1. So the first thing you do before you make a decision is you look at the list to see where you fall, or maybe you already know. The applications are different. The Tier 1 application is a little bit longer. Tier 2 is a very simple application. We know you. If you've received a grant from us this year, we know your board. We're just asking, has anything changed? It's a very simple application. Tier 1 is also not a complicated application. We're trying to streamline it. Another thing that we know in equity and grant making is that we need to make even the application process accessible. And so we have done that. And then, yeah, this is how you evaluate which one, where you fall. I'm trying to also read the chat. Okay, next slide. You do have to be a Sonoma County nonprofit or a nonprofit that is headquartered outside of Sonoma County, but would be serving Sonoma County with your direct services. If you are not a nonprofit, if you do not have a 501c3, you may apply with a fiscal sponsor. You need to have an agreement with a fiscal sponsor, and that agreement would be uploaded on your application. This is not a grant program for scholarships, for annual fundraising, capital campaigns, conferences. This fund and most of our grant making is not for political or religious purposes. So that's the grants program. Next slide. This is the time for your questions. So here's how we're going to do it. If you can, there's a reactions button. If you raise your hand, your name will come to the top of my participant list, and I can see you and call on you. And then I see all of you are muted, so just be sure to unmute yourself.
Karen, do you want us to do introductions real quick?
Oh yeah, thank you. Thank you. Please, Ariana, Caitlin, and then John, please introduce yourself.
Hi, everyone. I think I know most of you. My name is Ariana Diaz de Leon, and I'm the Senior Program Officer for the Community Impact Team.
Hi there, everybody. I'm Caitlin Childs. I'm the Director of Communications for Community Foundation. It's nice to see you all.
Good morning. I'm John McGurk. I'm a senior fellow that started at the foundation just a few months ago, and looking forward to working through this first grants program with you all.
What a great team. Thank you, team. And I'm seeing a couple questions I'll go ahead and start with. So the collaboration. Yes, collaboration is great. Collaboration is something that we are always trying to help foster. In this case, we wouldn't make a grant of $50,000 to a collaborative. I would recommend that you apply to organizations, apply separately, and just in your application, talk about your collaboration and how you will be working together. It strengthens and helps us understand how you're providing wraparound services. But we would want to be able to give you each the maximum amount. And since we don't have a $50,000 grant, you wouldn't want to apply together. I hope that answers your question. I'm not seeing any hands raised. Am I missing it, Caitlin? Do you see any hands raised? Oh, you're muted, Caitlin.
No, so everybody, just wanted to reiterate, if you have a question and want to ask it, down at the bottom of your screen is the participants icon. And if you click participants, there should be a button to raise your hand, and then just keep that hand button raised and then we'll call on you. Karen, I do think there is a question from Vicki in the chat. Can direct projects of public school districts serving COVID affected areas count as 501c3s?
Yes, so if you are applying, thank you, Vicki, and I know, would you be applying through the school district or McDowell Family Center? How would you be doing it?
Our resource center is a project of Petaluma Adult School, which is part of Petaluma City Schools. So I just wondered if we need to find a fiscal sponsor, and we do have relationships, or if we can apply as the school district, because that's the legal entity.
Yep. We've done that before, and so you could apply through the school district.
Thank you so much.
And then Jill is asking about the 3 geographies cited exclusive or preferred. They are not exclusive. That is, again, all of the criteria that we've stated are preferred criteria, but not exclusive. So one thing that I didn't mention, and I think it's helpful to know, is whatever data we collect from these applications is data that we will share. So not necessarily your organization name, but for example, we do get asked, what are the needs in the community? We get asked by our donors, we get asked by the donors that are contributing to this fund. And so we will use the information to say, look, we couldn't fund certain percentage of these, but here's what the greatest need is. It didn't align with our criteria, but hey, other funders in the community, hey, donors, look at this is the pressing need and it's not being addressed. So particularly tier 2, if you're already an organization that has received a grant from us, it will take you maybe an hour at the most, literally at the most. And that data we will use. So some part of it, I don't want to encourage you to apply even if you don't think you're a good fit, but there is value in applying. We do work really hard to keep the ratio of no's to yeses reasonable. So we built this criteria for you to help self-select if you think you're a fit. But at the same time, we do want to hear and learn from you. So I see we have a couple questions and some hands raised. Would a previous donor directed grant exclude us from tier 1 status? Not donor directed grants. From donor advised funds, no. So I would say definitely take a look at the list. The list is on our website. And if you have any questions, additionally, if you received a grant from the Sonoma County Vintners Foundation, the community grant, that does not put you in tier 2. That is their grants program. It's not ours. We just administer it for them. So it can get confusing. There's a lot of resource that goes out from the community foundation, but this is specifically grants that have come from our department. So just take a look at the list. Jill, why don't you go ahead and ask your question.
I just, when you said all the criteria were preferred, not exclusive. I just wanted to clarify that, except for the fact that it's for direct services, right? That's not a preferred, that is.
That's the definition of the grants program.
Right, that's, yeah, okay.
Yeah, to provide direct services. We've done a lot of, and we will intend to continue to do, capacity building to nonprofits. We've given a lot of general operating support grants. That has been what we have primarily funded thus far. But this grant is for direct service, so thanks for that clarification. And then let's see, from Patrick, do you prefer the grants to add new services to our existing services or just accelerate what we're already doing? That's an interesting question, and we don't have a preference. I mean, typically from a funder, it's not as interesting to see, oh, we're going to create a program because here's a grant that we might be able to get. You know, we don't want to see you creating a program just because it fits our funding. But if you've had a great idea, you've been working in the community and you see a need, and this funding would allow you to address that need, and it's a little bit different than what you've already been doing, that's fine. So we haven't set a criteria that has a preference in that way. Okay, any other questions that you may have? And we can dive into the how to apply. Oh, good. Thank you, Caitlin. Caitlin has put a link in the chat that allows you to see the list. Ariana, before you go on, I'm just going to answer a couple questions. I'm a little surprised that maybe you're all just still trying to take in all the many words that I've just thrown at you at 9 a.m. But there are, I know that a couple questions that have come our way. One, we do have a really great FAQ on the website too, and I would really look at that. That's built on the questions that have come to us via email once the grants program was launched. And so that is direct answers to some of your questions. But I've had a couple questions like, we're an arts organization and we provide arts programming to Latinx families, and that is really supporting their mental health. Would that be a fit? So that's an excellent question, and one that is not a black and white answer. It's a direct service. It is likely supporting mental health. It's targeting the Latinx community. Is it a direct service for families or individuals who have been impacted by COVID? Potentially. So you can see the thought process that you're going to need to go through to make your own decision about whether or not, what is the real intention of your program, and is it really doing what you know we're trying to do, which is, we've got a real problem in our community. We have families who are really struggling because they don't have the resources equal to some others. And we want to make sure that this money is helping those families and individuals. So you make a decision about whether or not that is a good fit. You're providing a direct service for that purpose. I see one more before I hand it over to Ariana. For direct services, are you more interested in evidence-based practices or open to experimental pioneering interventions? Yay, I love that question. Well, that's what's so interesting about this program, is that we are trying to bust out of the ways that we're typically operating and funding, and see if we can elevate new organizations who are doing the work on the ground. If we can elevate and find pioneering interventions that maybe we haven't had on our radar yet. So absolutely take advantage of that, the mindset that we're bringing to this grants program, which is to be more experimental, reach out to grassroots organizations. Okay, you can always put more questions in the chat. Yes, I answered that one, Caitlin. Okay, you can always put more questions in the chat, but for now I'm going to hand it over to Ariana. She's going to go back to the presentation and tell you about the technology side of things, application side.
All right, thank you, Karen. And now we are moving right along to the application process, which might not be as interesting as everything that Karen has just covered, but it is just as important. So we're going to be taking a look at how to apply, how do you even get to the application, then looking at the different application components, and finally taking a look at where you can get technical support if you need it, and also the timeline for this grant program. And we will end by opening up again for general questions that you have for us. So how to apply. If you go to our website, sonomacf.org, you'll see on the top right corner a button that says Grantee Login. If you just click on that button, then you will go to our login page for our online portal. And this online portal, we transitioned to it in October of last year. So if you applied for a grant from Community Foundation since then, you will have an account, so you can log in using your existing email address and your password. If you forgot your password, there is a link so that you can reset it right there on that page. If you have not set up an account for your organization on this portal, you will need to do so. So you would select Create New Account right here. And if you are creating a new account, you will have to register your organization. So it's going to ask you some very basic questions about your organization name, your tax ID number, the information for your executive director and who to contact. And then this is where you will also set up your username, which is your email address, and your password. Please note, if you're using a fiscal sponsor, this registration has to be for the fiscal sponsor organization, because that's who we would have a legal contract with. And after you've created your account, you will be able to see the application. So either way, if you're registering for the first time or if you're logging in, you will end up on your dashboard. And when you go to your dashboard, you're going to see this icon up at the top that says Apply. If you select that, you will see all of the available competitive grant programs that we have. Currently, this is the only one on the page, so it's going to be right on the top for you. And it provides a summary, which includes the title of the grant program, also a basic timeline for you to reference quickly when the application is due, when you can expect to find out whether you were awarded a grant or not, and then also the grant period for this grant program. And then if you have any questions, you have my contact info here, also Annette's contact info. And so to apply for the grant, you would go in and select Apply on this blue button. If you're not ready to apply and you just want to preview it, you can preview it here, or you can also preview the questions on Word documents that we have on an overview page on our web page. So now we're getting to the application components. And as Karen mentioned, we have two tiers for this grant program. We have Tier 1 questions and Tier 2 questions. And for Tier 2, because we already have an existing relationship with your organization for the 2020 year, we are only focusing on the narrative questions, which are very brief. There is one question that asks how you would be allocating the funds in this grant request. That's really the bulk of that application. And so it is a very simple application. It will probably take you no more than an hour to complete. I know that you'd have to do some more internal discussions with your organization to figure out what to apply for, but it is very streamlined. For Tier 1, because we don't have an existing relationship with your organization in 2020, we do ask a bit more. And particularly because some of these organizations might be applying for a grant from us from the first time, we want to know a bit more about you. So we do ask you to submit an organization budget for the current year, as well as a project budget for how you would apply the funds that you're requesting. We ask for a board of directors list, and then we ask narrative questions. And although there's more questions here than in the Tier 2 list, it still is fairly streamlined. So one thing that I want to note is if you look at the applications for both of these, you will see character counts. You do completely fill each answer to reach those character counts. We just put them there to give you flexibility, but it is really, really important to be concise when answering these questions and to make sure that you are answering the question that is being asked.
Ariana, you cut out there for a second while you were saying that, so I just want to reiterate. The character counts are there as a guide, but you do not need to fill out, you don't need to write it so it all fits the exact amount of character counts. As she said, being concise is actually always a good practice in writing grants.
Thank you, Karen.
Sure.
So now for technical support and tips, we do highly recommend that you review the COVID grant program that's on the webpage. If you go to sonomacf.org and then go to the Apply for Grants tab, you will see the overview there. And once you go to that page, you will read everything that you need to the grant program. So the FAQs are found on there. We highly recommend that you review those. There may be some questions that you haven't thought of, but may actually help you decide whether or not this is a good fit for your organization. You will also find the question lists for both Tier 1 and Tier 2. They're in Word doc, so you can download that Word document and fill them out there if you prefer, and then copy and paste it into the actual online application. We highly recommend you to review all of this before you actually start applying. Once again, please be concise. As far as internet browsers, we find that Chrome, Firefox, Safari are best for this online portal. Internet Explorer will work, but it might be a little bit more glitchy, so we recommend these other three. So now for the timeline, the application is open. It opened on August 10th. So you can access it now and apply and submit it. The application deadline is August 28th, and it closes at 5 p.m. And one thing that we do want to request is that if you have any questions, you come to us as soon as possible. You can reach out to me, you can reach out to Annette or Karen, but we do want to make sure that we get to your questions as soon as possible. Towards the end of the application period, we do see a high volume of calls and emails, and we want to make sure that we're able to get to your questions before the deadline. So please do reach out to us early. The grant period is from November 2020 through October 2021, so it is a full year for the grant program. However, you have to expend the grant during that period, but you don't have to spread it out throughout the period. So if you expend it within 6 months, that's okay. And we are hoping to notify all of the applicants, whether you were awarded the grant or declined. We are hoping to notify everyone by the 2nd week of October. And then finally, if you have any questions, particularly if there's specific questions of criteria and eligibility, you can always reach out to me. My email address and phone number are on here. If you have any technical questions with the online application, you can reach out to Annette, and her contact information is also on here, or you can reach out to me as well.
Ariana, I'm going to ask a question. There are a couple of optional questions on the application. Can you just talk a little bit about the optional questions?
Yeah, so we have some optional questions that we've included that will help us with data gathering. They're both in the Tier 1 and the Tier 2 applications. And those questions are really to find out how your organization has been impacted by COVID. There's different options, and you can check all the ones that apply for your organization. That will just help us understand where organizations are right now. Another piece is about diversity, equity, and inclusion. And those questions ask, how many people on your board are people of color? And does your leader identify as a person of color? And that to us is just a continuation of data that we've been collecting when it comes to diversity, equity, and inclusion. So these are optional. We encourage you to answer them if you can. They're very quick to answer, and they will help us with our data gathering.
And then the only other thing I wanted to add is we do expect that this will receive many applications, and as much as everyone does try to get their application in before the deadline, we often do see a big rush at the last hour before the deadline. And that is, it can be hard for us to respond to your request if you're having any technical difficulty at that time. So We like the idea of putting the deadline on your calendar, maybe 2 days before the actual deadline. And then if you do have any challenges, we will be very, very available for you when we may not be at the actual deadline. So that's a little trick. Any questions for Ariana? There's one question around the board of directors list. For, would it be the fiscal sponsor? So Ariana, maybe you can talk a little bit about the way an organization applies. Yeah.
So for organizations that have a fiscal sponsor, I want to reiterate that when you register, you do have to register with the information of the fiscal sponsor. And then once you get to the actual application, it's going to ask you, the very first question is going to be about your 501c3 eligibility. So it's going to ask you if you have a 501c3 charitable status, if you're a school, if you're a government entity, or if you have a fiscal sponsor. So if you do, you would select that piece, and then another set of questions would open up. And that set of questions is going to ask specifically about the organization being sponsored. So that's where you get the opportunity to enter information about the organization that will be doing the program for the grant request. The board of directors list, if you're a tier 1 organization that is requested for the fiscal sponsor organization, what I would recommend is that you also add a page in that same upload for the advisory board for your organization or for your own list of directors, so that then we understand what the difference is between the organization's board of directors and then your own. So both of those should be included if you have a fiscal sponsor.
And we really do encourage you applying with a fiscal sponsor because of the intention of this grant. We want to give extra support for anyone who is using a fiscal sponsor. It can be confusing and challenging. We don't want that to be an obstacle. So if you are applying with fiscal sponsorship, just reach out to us and we can kind of walk you through that if there's any questions. All right. I just feel like there's questions hovering over you and we're not getting to them. But is it really true that we were so concise and so good that we're going to finish 20 minutes early? Or are there other questions that you might have? Excellent. I think we did it. We will. Teresa.
Hi, I realize there's priority to tier 1 applicants, but does that mean that tier 2 applicants have a lesser chance, or that we should be looking at applying for, a lesser amount, or how does that work with tier 2 applicants?
Now there's an excellent question. Thank you so much. What we will be doing when we review, we will look at tier 1 applications first. They will be our priority, so we will read them first, we will evaluate them first. But I don't suspect that we will, that all the funding that's available will go to tier 1. It's just, most of the organizations that are doing the work have received grants from us right now, many of them, and I suspect that we will continue to fund them as well. So it's hard to know, we really don't know until we see who applies, but we are fairly confident that we will be funding a significant number of tier 2 applicants as well. And like we said, it's really worth it. Please take a look at the tier 2 application. It's so straightforward that it's just worth it to give it a try. If you all other things considered, you find yourself to be a fit. Because it's pretty simple and it will keep us informed. So SCBC, I see your hand is raised.
Yes, hi, thank you so much again for the great presentation. I remember earlier you all were speaking to if you are going to be collaborating with other organizations that they should also individually apply. Could you provide just a little more clarity on that? But I think I got the message, yeah. Yeah,
thank you. Yes. So what I want to say about that is if you are working in a collaboration, two organizations and the whole purpose is for you to be working together, you could certainly say, choose one of you to apply, and you know, but you would only have, if you submitted one application for your collaboration, you would only have access to $25,000, right? But if you are both doing good work and your direct service fits everything and your collaboration is strong and you both need $25,000 in order to do the work, then you could apply individually and potentially have access to more funding. You know, when you ask for how much money, you will only be able to ask for $25,000. So it's really up to you. If you feel like your collaboration is strong and you only need $25,000, apply together. Then only one of you has to submit an application. Does that answer your question?
Yes, it does. Thank you very
Okay.
much. Yeah, very clear.
Yeah, thank you. Okay. Anything else? I'm trying to flip through and see if other hands are raised. Oh, I just don't want to say goodbye. It's so nice to see all your smiling faces. Let's see, is there anyone else, anything else in the chat? Just a lot of good positive feedback. All right. Thank you, everybody. Really look forward to learning more about what you're doing. Please feel free to reach out if you have any other questions. And let's stay hopeful. And if you're tired, go take a nap. You know, you're probably working from home, so you can just crawl right back into bed. So, you know, that's what we have to do, is take care of ourselves too. All right. Very nice to see you all. We will have this recording on our website. We have another workshop. There might be other questions asked there, so you could take a look at that too if you really wanted to. Otherwise, have a great day. See you all later.